Women entrepreneurs are powerful influences in economic growth and innovation, and they continue to face significant barriers when it comes to accessing capital, which is a critical uh, factor limiting women businesses' potential and broader economic advancement. I'm Enid Doggett, CEO of Inspire Media. And today's amazing panel brings together leaders from key organizations within the WBC community who are actively working closely with business owners to help bridge the gender funding gap and support entrepreneurs and also identify and unlock capital access within our community. They bring together decades of experience which are championing business owners, particularly women business owners, and creating pathways to their success. Because of your vast experience, I mean, one of the things that I'm really interested in learning with you is about your mission and how your mission has evolved. And since, you began. And Laura, why don't you start with that?
Thank you, Enid. First of all, thrilled to be here today and amongst these esteemed leaders, Myla and Angela. We appreciate being included in the work of the WBC. So, WBENC initially was primarily focused on a nationally recognized certification for women businesses and a very heavy focus in its early days on partnerships with corporate America. And it really was intended when formed to be an organization that would help corporate America locate small women-owned suppliers in their for their supply chain. And what that's done is we started with that central focus and certification, but really over time, what that's done is it's really flourished, and it's included. And now has evolved to include creating connections, really important ones, between suppliers and procurement organizations. And in addition, what we did is we instituted a national conference to actually create in person connections. And we bring people together with meet and greets and with one on one meetings. Over the years, we've evolved into providing a lot of education. And we provide education across finance, marketing, operations, HR, tools that will help entrepreneurs, right, build and grow their businesses. And we saw that explode actually during the pandemic when we couldn't come together in person, and we were able to expand on all of that programming. And really, it's about what's evolved into is creating greater accessibility for our women-owned businesses and other entrepreneurs. For this programming, and it opens up the doors to many opportunities. We actually have a pitch that's open to our entire network, and we hold that pitch. It's evolved over the years. We partner with all of our regional organizations, and we have an annual pitch that culminates with a prize money in November each year. So the organization has really grown, but its core mission was focused on women's business development, and now we focus on women's business and small business development.
Thank you, Myla.
Absolutely. Also, thank you for having me. I am thrilled also to be here with you, Enid, Laura, Angela. It's a pleasure. So much of what Laura shared is so intentional and thoughtful, and I know nothing of WeBank except for that is how you all operate, right? I've heard so much about the work that you all do, and if there's nothing else that can be said, it is so thoughtful, the support that you all provide to women business owners. So thank you for that, Laura. I would say C200, our core has always been about connection. So, Laura, you just talked about that. And that is truly what our core has been. We were founded 40 years ago with the spirit of there were no real places for women who had achieved a certain level in their career to connect with one another, to learn from one another, to educate each other, to advance one another. And so I would say the spirit of that remains the same. The thing that's changed is the market, right? And so the way that we need to connect women looks different than it may have years ago. I think the needs still remain the same, but ultimately, what we are working to do is ensure that our connections are intentional and that individuals are able to come together in ways that don't just advance them professionally, but also personally. Because we do find that so many of our women feel very lonely and ultimately don't know where to go for the supports that they need, both again, personal, right? What does it mean to be a woman business owner? What does it mean to be a corporate executive woman? And no one can really answer that question except for someone else who's gone through that journey or is part of that experience. And so C200, our mission again is really about, and our unique value is really about the connections that our women, our members make with one another. We are always thinking about, are there opportunities for them to learn? We're providing opportunities for education, whether that be something, kind of more new on the scene and social media and how we leverage that, whether that be about how do you manage your, younger generation staff, but all the way through understanding tariffs and understanding, how the market is changing for women. How do you access the capital that we're talking about today? And so I think so much of, again, what WBENC is doing, what I know WIPP is doing, is critical right now, if never before, to how we think about supporting entrepreneurs in particular.
Angela?
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to join conferences like this and have an opportunity to engage with my colleagues. You all are doing amazing work, and I'm just fortunate to be here. So thank you to WBC for having me today. When WIP was founded nearly 25 years ago, we'll be 25 years old in June of 2026. So you guys make plans to come join us for our anniversary. Our mission was pretty clear, right? And that was to give women entrepreneurs and business leaders a voice in Washington, D.C., where critical decisions are being made that affect their ability to grow and compete in those early days. And so back then, our mission was, and support really meant advocacy. How can we advocate for them? And so over time, our support has evolved alongside the needs of founders and leaders. So today, we not only advocate, but we also have what we call our ACE principles: advocacy, community, and education. So we're educating women business owners, we're connecting them, and we're equipping them with the tools that they need to thrive in the same way that Myla and Laura have talked about, right? So we've expanded from just influencing policy to hands-on resources that help them navigate capital readiness, understand what's happening with cybersecurity, compliance, and emerging industries like energy, manufacturing, and artificial intelligence. And so the thing that has stayed consistent is our commitment to leveling the playing field through advocacy. And what has changed is really the scope and the depth of our support, right? So from opening doors in Washington, D.C., to providing direct pathways to contracts, to funding, to partnerships. So in many ways, WIP has moved from simply ensuring women have a seat at the table to building new tables where women can lead the conversation. And that's the evolution that you've seen with WIP, from advocacy to access and to action.
Thank you all for those amazing insights about your organizations and the landscape. And now I'd like to let's go a little deeper. Laura, at what stage do you think the gap is the most pronounced in terms of business growth for women?
So as it relates to the gap around access to capital, because I think that that's a fundamental gap for all, we actually see that gap exist at all stages, and we really think it's about leveraging the different types of capital along the entrepreneurial journey, right? And clearly, we hear about the statistics around the very low number, of women businesses who actually are able to secure venture capital. But with WeBank, we really focus on the entire journey, and we do a lot of leaning in on educating, because we think the biggest gaps right now maybe is in education and understanding of your financials and taking ownership of that at different parts of your journey. So, for example, if you start out, you may leverage funding from friends and families or grants, right? And as you grow, maybe a cash flow crunch or the need to fulfill a big contract becomes an issue, and therefore you need to be pursuing a line of credit or invoice factoring or PO financing. And maybe then, with expansion and innovation or scaling, you may need to pursue an acquisition, right? Or you're requiring a bank loan. So your needs change along your journey. And what we're trying to help entrepreneurs understand is that, right? You first need to understand what are your needs, right? And understand your business model, your long-term goals, and envisioning even your exit strategy early in your journey so that you can start to plan for the different types of capital you need along the way. But we do recognize that access to capital is a gap. We just see that it exists at all stages, both from an accessibility standpoint and also from an education and an understanding and a preparedness standpoint on behalf of the businesses.
Angela, what are you seeing in terms of SBA and other business offerings?
So first, let me just echo everything that Laura said is what we see, right? It depends on what stage of business growth a woman is in, from the point that they start their business to the point that they're thinking about selling it. They need different forms of capital. And I think that the ecosystem as a whole is doing a better job of not just saying, hey, here's what this type of capital is, but helping them to understand, like, WIPP did a capital readiness program last year. Like, where are you in that ecosystem? Do you understand enough about your own business to identify where you are so that you seek the right type of funding at that point? And then we partner with corporates just like you all do. And one of the things that happened most recently, as a matter of fact, Laura, it was at WBENC conference just back in June. One of our partners really just broke down, if you have this amount of money and this type of need, here's what you do with your credit card and here's how you pay it off. And if you're at this stage and you're trying to do this, you do these other things. So to answer your question specifically about other types of support, the SBA does not lend. The SBA guarantees, right? So you've got to have a good banking relationship. You should pick your banker just like you pick the other services, right? So you've got to have a good banking relationship. And then if you get turned down 3 times, then the SBA will back a loan for you. There are some banks that do that very well, and there are some that are not. So you just need to do a little bit of research and find the ones that do that well. There are also new funding mechanisms that have come about in the last couple of years, and CDFIs are one of those, where they're really looking at other factors, right? They're looking at the mission of your organization. They're looking at your leadership team. There are funders who are using technology now to say, why don't we just look at what your receivables look like? What does that look like when those funds are coming into your bank? They're actually connecting to your bank account to see, oh, we can see that there's steady revenue coming in. So perhaps we can lend this smaller amount of money than you might get from a traditional bank by going to those community-based resources who really want, it's to their advantage for you to be successful if you're in their community ecosystem. And so you see some of those kinds of things available. There are now new platforms. Hello Alice didn't exist many years ago when we first got started. So they're just additional things that are available for women business owners. And that key is really knowing where you are and what your needs are at that time.
Myla, what trends are you seeing and you have seen recently and particularly in the last 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what Angela and Laura just spoke to, but it is truly about where do I go, right? If there's not a question we don't get more often than any other, it is who should I connect with? Who should I be talking about this? To Angela's point, depending on where you are in your business, your needs vary greatly, right? So I love, Angela, the example you just gave of someone who broke down what you should be doing at each stage of your business. I would say, in particular, with this last year, what we have found is, and I continue to go back to the word connection because it's just such a powerful thing in all of the work that we do. But we have really found the need for people to get very strategic and thoughtful about how they change their business model, how they may, if they're in manufacturing, how they think about their manufacturing different. And really being able to connect with one another. So one of the things that we do is we host something called a business resilience forum for our members. And it is a space both for corporate executives, but also for entrepreneurs to come in and discuss some of the challenges that they're dealing with within their current business, and really get the resources they need and thought partnership that they need. Again, I go back to where we started as an organization. It was the spirit of women coming together so that they can learn from one another and educate each other. We find that the power of doing that is within our members. They have more knowledge that they can share with one another than we could ever kind of scrapple together, gather together on our own. And so I think that is our main thing, is really what we're hearing is, I need support, I need partnership, I need advice, because there is an ever changing market around me. I can't keep up with it all the time. And so where can I find the support that I need to continue to grow my business? Specifically where we are, we're seeing so many businesses that are in crisis. So specifically now, I think the ability to bring women business owners and entrepreneurs together is critical.
Angela, and can you also cite some of your research as you talk mainly, a little bit about some of the common opportunities or challenges that women business owners are facing now that you've seen through some research and through some of your work?
Sure. So WIPP is really proud to have partnered with Wells Fargo and Venture Neuro Core Woman to produce the Impact of Women-Owned Business report. And so the report really looked at the gap between, we started by looking at the gap between 2019 and 2023 to see what was happening with women's businesses. I'll talk about that gap from 2019 to 2024 for today, though. There's been a trend that women businesses have been starting at a faster pace than our male counterparts for a number of years. And so when we looked at trends, like what was it that drove, what's been driving this business growth, and what will it look like to sustain it? That gap between 2019 and 2024 was initiated by the pandemic related factors, right? Folks were starting up businesses, so we saw an increase in entrepreneurial spirit. We saw shifting consumer behaviors because a number of things were happening across the country at that time. We saw government support because everyone across every industry and every facet of life was suffering as a result of the pandemic, and greater personal time and savings that now has persisted beyond the crisis, right? So we came out of the pandemic, and those things continue to be trends that we're seeing now. Sustained growth is now fueled by a complex interplay of a number of different factors, evolving priorities towards flexibility and autonomy, right? You don't necessarily have to stay in a box. You can be creative and do some things that you weren't able to do before. Greater access to digital tools. When we did that research, I tell people all the time, women-owned businesses use technology in ways that I'm hoping that we can get someone to support some additional research with us to show what that really looked like, right? Changing social norms. So what used to be acceptable or whatever was that box, you didn't necessarily have to stay in that. Women have and continue to start and grow businesses out of economic necessity, and then the discovery of untapped market opportunities. Just think about what's happening with the gig economy and with the use of technology. So both during and after the pandemic, um, women businesses have just been resilient, and innovation is one thing that has always driven the work that they do. And so we just see that continue to emerge. Some businesses have adapted and pivoted. Others have experienced unexpected growth. The pandemic really just spurred this collective effort to address economic inequities through federal funding, state funding, local stimulus programs. And then you saw additional backing that came from corporations and philanthropic organizations and entrepreneurial support organizations like us, right, with a renewed focus on empowering women entrepreneurs. So it will be interesting to see what that data looks like in another year from now, to see, because there are some shifting priorities that are happening in the country. But those are the things that we've seen.
I want you all to address the potential challenge that you would give to funders or potential funders in terms of their course in funding and supporting women-owned businesses. Myla, why don't you start?
Absolutely. So ultimately, I would say I think going back to Angela's point, women are creative. We will make something out of nothing. And so I think the spirit of really thinking strategically about how you make your investments is critical, especially right now.
What I would add to it is, you know what? Women have impact, and women businesses have economic impact. And as Angela was noting in some of those statistics, women businesses contribute, they hire the workforce, right? They drive revenue growth, they drive innovation, so new product and service development. And we see it all the time.
I challenge investors to go a bit further, right? Commit to setting aside like a specific or a defined percentage of their portfolio for women-owned businesses. Even if you look at a conservative 5% of their portfolio,
Mm.
it would begin to shift the landscape regarding access to capital, because currently that number is smaller than that. Capital is the fuel that accelerates women's abilities to scale. And so just set aside a defined percentage.
A perfect way to end this amazing discussion. And I want to thank our panelists again, Laura Taylor, Myla Skinner, and Angela Dingle. I'm Enid Doggett, and thank you.